The storm that tore through Reno, Nevada in the spring of 1883 killed 3 men and injured a dozen more. And Sophia Sinclair arrived at the makeshift hospital set up in the town hall with enough bandages and determination to save every soul who still drew breath. She had been helping Doc Patterson for 2 years now, ever since her father died and left her without much of anything except a small cabin on the edge of town and the nursing skills he had taught her. The old physician had taken her under his wing, when most folks thought a woman had no business tending to the wounded. But Doc Patterson knew better than to turn away skilled hands. Sophia had proven herself time and again, her steady fingers and calm demeanor making her invaluable whenever trouble came to town. The storm had hit without much warning, a violent tempest that sent livestock running and tore the roof clean off the saloon. Men had been caught in the chaos, struck by flying debris, crushed under falling beams, thrown from spooked horses. Now they lay on cots and blankets spread across the town hall floor, groaning and bleeding while Sophia moved among them with quiet efficiency. She knelt beside a ranch hand whose leg had been broken in 2 places, setting the bone as gently as she could while he bit down on a leather strap. Doc Patterson worked on the more serious cases, performing a surgery on a man whose chest had been pierced by a fence post. The air smelled of blood and rain and fear, but Sophia kept her focus, moving from one patient to the next with the kind of grace that came from practice and necessity. By nightfall, the worst of it was over. The 3 dead had been carried to the undertaker, and the injured were stable enough that Sophia could finally take a breath. She stood near the window, looking out at the wreckage the storm had left behind. Reno was a tough town, built on silver mining and cattle ranching, and it would recover the way it always did. But tonight, everything felt raw and uncertain. "You should get some rest," Doc Patterson said, coming to stand beside her. He was a gray-haired man with kind eyes and hands that shook slightly these days, though they steadied when he held a scalpel. "You have been on your feet for 12 hours. "So have you," Sophia replied, though she knew he was right. Her back ached and her dress was stained with blood that would never quite wash out. "I will stay a bit longer, just to make sure nobody takes a turn for the worse." The doctor nodded, understanding her dedication. "You are a good woman, Sophia. Your father would be proud." She smiled at that, though the mention of her father still brought a pang of grief. He had been everything to her, teaching her to read and write, showing her how to tend wounds and mix medicines. When he died of pneumonia 2 winters ago, she had felt utterly lost. But she had found purpose in continuing his work, in helping people the way he had always done. As Doc Patterson went to check on the surgical patient, Sophia made another round through the hall. Most of the men were sleeping now, exhausted by pain and shock. She adjusted blankets, checked bandages, offered water to those who were awake. It was during this round that she noticed a cowboy sitting on a cot in the corner, cradling his right arm against his chest. He was younger than most of the injured men, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and sharp blue eyes that followed her movements. His clothes marked him as a working ranch hand, worn jeans and a faded shirt, dusty boots that had seen 1,000 miles of hard riding. There was something about his face that caught her attention, a strength in his jaw and a sadness in his eyes that spoke of struggles she could only imagine. "I have not checked you yet," Sophia said, approaching his cot. "Where are you hurt?" "My arm," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. "Got thrown from my horse when the wind spooked her, landed hard on my right side." Sophia knelt beside him, her skirts pooling around her. "Let me see." He hesitated for just a moment before extending his arm. She took it carefully in her hands, feeling along the bones from shoulder to wrist. He winced when she pressed near his elbow, and she frowned in concentration. "I do not think anything is broken," she said after a thorough examination. "But you have a bad bruise and possibly a sprain. I will wrap it for support, and you should keep it rested for at least a week." "A week," he said, and there was something almost disappointed in his tone. "I cannot afford to be laid up that long. I have work to do at the ranch." "Then you should have thought of that before you let your horse throw you," Sophia replied with a slight smile, the first she had managed all day. She fetched clean bandages and began wrapping his arm with practiced efficiency. "What is your name?" "Wade Nichols," he said, watching her work with an intensity that made her slightly self-conscious. "I work at the Double R Ranch about 5 miles north of town." "I know it," Sophia said. The Double R was one of the larger spreads in the area, owned by a man named Robert Ramsey who had a reputation for being fair but demanding. "You are lucky this is not worse. I have seen men lose arms to injuries that seemed minor at first." "I will consider myself fortunate then," Wade said, and when she glanced up, she found him looking directly at her face rather than at his injured arm. "I have seen you around town before. You work with Doc Patterson." "I do," she confirmed, tying off the bandage securely. "There, that should hold. Come back in 3 days so I can check on it and change the wrapping." 3 days, he repeated as if committing it to memory. "I will be here." Something in the way he said it made Sophia pause, but before she could think too much about it, another patient called for water. She rose quickly, smoothing her skirts, and moved on to the next task. But she found herself aware of Wade Nichols in a way she had not been aware of the other patients, conscious of his presence even when she was across the room. The night wore on, and eventually Doc Patterson insisted that Sophia go home and rest. She was too tired to argue. The walk to her cabin took only 10 minutes, through streets still littered with debris from the storm. The sky was clear now, stars bright and cold overhead, as if the violence of the afternoon had never happened. Inside her small home, Sophia lit a lamp and heated water for tea. She changed out of her ruined dress and washed her hands and face, scrubbing until the water ran clear. Then she sat at her small table and allowed herself to feel the exhaustion that had been building all day. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the teacup to her lips, and she closed her eyes, trying to push away the memories of broken bodies and desperate prayers. But mixed in with those dark thoughts was the image of Wade Nichols, the way he had looked at her with those blue eyes, the warmth of his skin under her fingers as she examined his arm. She shook her head, annoyed with herself. He was just another patient, nothing more. She had tended to dozens of injured men over the past 2 years, and never given any of them a second thought beyond their medical needs. Still, as she lay in bed that night, waiting for sleep to come, she found herself wondering if he would really come back in 3 days. And she found herself hoping that he would. The next morning, Sophia returned to the town hall to check on the patients. Most were doing well, though one of the men with a head injury seemed confused and could not remember his own name. Doc Patterson said it might be temporary, or it might be permanent. There was no way to know with head wounds. Wade Nichols was still there, though his cot was empty. She found him outside, standing in the morning sun and moving his arm cautiously. When he saw her, he quickly put it back in the sling she had fashioned for him the night before. "You should be resting," Sophia said, coming down the steps to join him. "I was getting some air," he said. "It is hard to breathe in there with all those men." She could not argue with that. The town hall smelled of sweat and sickness despite their best efforts to keep it clean. "How does your arm feel this morning?" "Stiff," he admitted, "but not as painful as last night." "That is good. The worst of the swelling should go down over the next few days." She studied him in the daylight, noticing details she had missed in the dim lamplight. He was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong nose and a mouth that looked like it might smile easily under better circumstances. There was a scar on his left cheekbone, white against his tanned skin, and she wondered how he had gotten it. "Will you be staying in town?" she asked. "Or going back to the ranch?" "I figured I would stay another night, just to make sure I am well enough to ride." He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Besides, you said I should come back in 3 days. Might as well stay close." "The town has a boarding house," Sophia said. "Mrs. Henderson runs it. She is a good woman and her rates are fair." "I know the place," Wade said. "I will get a room there." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, and Sophia realized she was lingering longer than necessary. "I should get back inside," she said finally. "There is much to do." "Of course," he said, stepping aside to let her pass. "Thank you again, Miss Sinclair." She paused on the steps, surprised. "How did you know my name?" I asked, he said simply, and there was something in his voice that made her heart skip in an unfamiliar way. Sophia spent the rest of the morning tending to patients, but her thoughts kept drifting back to that brief conversation. She told herself she was being foolish, that there was nothing remarkable about a man asking her name. But the way he had looked at her, the way he had said it, felt different somehow. Doc Patterson noticed her distraction. "Something on your mind?" he asked as they worked together to change a man's bandages. "No," Sophia said quickly. "Just tired, I suppose." The old doctor gave her a knowing look but said nothing more. 3 days passed in a blur of activity. The injured men slowly recovered, and by the end of the week, most had gone home. The town began to clean up the storm damage, rebuilding roofs and repairing fences. Life in Reno returned to its normal rhythm, and Sophia fell back into her usual routine of helping Doc Patterson with his regular patients. On the 3rd day after the storm, Wade Nichols appeared at the doctor's office just as Sophia was finishing up for the afternoon. She had been half expecting him, though she had tried not to think about it too much. "Right on time," she said, gesturing for him to come in. "Let me look at that arm." She unwrapped the bandage carefully, examining the bruised skin underneath. The swelling had gone down considerably, and the discoloration was already starting to fade from angry purple to a sickly yellow-green. "It looks much better," she said, gently flexing his elbow. "Does this hurt?" "A little," he admitted, "but nothing I cannot handle." Sophia rewrapped the arm with fresh bandages, aware of how close they were standing, how she could smell the clean scent of soap on his skin. He must have bathed before coming to see her, which seemed like an unusual amount of effort for a simple medical check. "You should be fine to return to light work," she said, stepping back to put some professional distance between them. "But nothing too strenuous for another week or so. No heavy lifting, no rough riding." "I will take it easy," Wade promised, though something in his tone suggested he was not particularly concerned about his arm anymore. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Miss Sinclair, I was wondering if I might ask you something." Sophia looked up from the table where she was gathering the used bandages. "Yes. Would you allow me to buy you dinner sometime, as a thank you for taking such good care of me?" The question caught her off guard, though some part of her had been half expecting it. She hesitated, weighing propriety against the sudden flutter of interest in her chest. She was a respectable woman, and having dinner with a man she barely knew could invite gossip. But she was also tired of being alone, tired of living a life that consisted only of work and solitude. "I suppose that would be acceptable," she said carefully, "as long as it is understood that this is simply a gesture of gratitude, nothing more." Wade's face broke into a smile that transformed his whole appearance, making him look younger and less burdened. "Of course, just gratitude." "There is a restaurant on Main Street, the Silver Spoon," Would tomorrow evening suit you? Tomorrow evening would be fine. Sophia agreed, trying to keep her voice steady even as her heart raced. After he left, she stood in the empty office for a long moment, wondering what she had just agreed to. Doc Patterson came in from the back room, where he had been organizing supplies, and gave her a shrewd look. "That young man seems quite taken with you," the doctor observed. "He is just being polite," Sophia protested, though she could feel heat rising in her cheeks. "If you say so," Doc Patterson said with a chuckle. "But I have been around long enough to recognize that look in a man's eyes. He will be back, injury or no injury." Sophia did not respond, but as she walked home that evening, she could not stop thinking about Wade's smile, about the way he had looked at her as if she was something precious. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her that way. Since her father died, most people in town saw her only as Doc Patterson's assistant, a useful pair of hands but not quite respectable, not quite proper. The work she did was necessary but not ladylike, and more than one woman had made it clear they thought Sophia should find a husband and settle into a more appropriate role. But Sophia loved her work. She loved the feeling of setting a broken bone correctly, of watching a wound heal under her care, of easing pain and fear with gentle words and skilled hands. The idea of giving that up to become someone's wife, to spend her days cooking and cleaning and bearing children, had never appealed to her. Yet as she prepared for bed that night, she found herself thinking about Wade Nichols in a way that had nothing to do with nursing or medicine. She wondered what it would be like to have dinner with him, to talk about things other than injuries and treatments. She wondered what his story was, how he had ended up working on a ranch in Nevada, whether he had family somewhere, or if he was as alone in the world as she was. The next evening, Sophia took extra care with her appearance. She wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned her dark hair up in a style that was both neat and flattering. She felt slightly ridiculous making such an effort, but she could not help herself. Wade was waiting for her outside the Silver Spoon, looking clean and nervous in a pressed shirt and vest. His arm was still wrapped, but he seemed to be moving it more easily. "You look beautiful," he said when he saw her, the words simple and sincere. "Thank you," Sophia replied, feeling suddenly shy. "You look quite presentable yourself." The restaurant was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of roasted meat in the air. They were seated by a window, and for a moment they both seemed uncertain about what to say. "How long have you been in Reno?" Sophia asked finally, deciding to break the silence. "About 3 years," Wade said. "I came out from Missouri after the war." "The war?" Sophia leaned forward with interest. "You are old enough to have fought." "Barely. I was 16 when it ended, but I spent the last year of it as a drummer boy in the Union Army." His expression darkened slightly. "It was not much of a way to grow up, but it taught me how to survive." Sophia felt a pang of sympathy. The Civil War had been over for nearly 2 decades, but its scars still marked the country and the people who had lived through it. "I am sorry. That must have been terrible." "It was a long time ago," Wade said, though his eyes suggested the memories were still fresh. "What about you? Have you always lived in Reno?" "No, my father and I came here when I was 15. He was a doctor, and he heard there was need for medical help in the mining towns. We lived in San Francisco before that." She smiled at the memory. "I loved the city, but father said there were too many doctors there already. He wanted to go where he could make a real difference." "And did he?" Wade asked gently. "Yes," Sophia said softly. "He saved many lives before he died, and he taught me to do the same." They talked through dinner, the conversation flowing more easily as they grew comfortable with each other. Wade told her about life on the Double R Ranch, about the long days and hard work, about the satisfaction of breaking a difficult horse or helping to deliver a calf. Sophia told him about her work with Doc Patterson, about the challenges of practicing medicine in a place where supplies were scarce and help was often too far away. "It must be difficult," Wade said, "being a woman in that profession. I imagine not everyone approves." "No, they do not," Sophia admitted. "But Doc Patterson believes in me, and that is what matters. And when someone is hurt or sick, they care less about propriety and more about getting help." "You are brave," Wade said, and the admiration in his voice was unmistakable. "I have met plenty of men who would not have the stomach for the work you do." Sophia felt warmth spread through her chest. It was rare for anyone to acknowledge the difficulty of her work, rarer still for someone to call her brave. "Thank you," she said quietly. After dinner, Wade walked her home through the quiet streets. The night was cool and clear, and above them the stars spread across the sky like scattered diamonds. "I enjoyed this evening," Wade said when they reached her cabin. "Very much." "So did I," Sophia admitted. She hesitated, then added, "Perhaps we could do it again sometime." "I would like that," Wade said, and his smile was genuine. "My arm has been healing so well, but I think I should probably have you check on it again in a few days, just to be safe." Something in the way he said it made Sophia's eyes narrow with sudden suspicion. "Your arm is fine, Wade Nichols. You do not need me to check on it again." "Are you sure?" he asked innocently. "It has been aching something terrible." Despite herself, Sophia laughed. "You are a terrible liar." "Maybe so," he admitted, grinning now. "But it got me another chance to see you, did it not?" "You could have just asked," Sophia pointed out. "I could have," Wade agreed. "But I was not sure you would say yes. A man has to be strategic about these things." Sophia shook her head, still smiling. "You are impossible. Is that a yes to seeing me again?" Wade asked hopefully. "Yes," Sophia said, surprising herself with how easily the word came. "But no more pretending to be injured. If you want to see me, just ask." "Deal," Wade said. He tipped his hat to her, a gesture that was somehow both respectful and playful. "Good night, Sophia." "Good night, Wade." She watched him walk away into the darkness, then went inside her cabin with a lightness in her step she had not felt in years. She told herself not to get too excited, that this might be nothing more than a brief flirtation. But as she lay in bed that night, she could not stop replaying the evening in her mind, could not stop thinking about the way Wade had looked at her across the dinner table. Over the next several weeks, Wade found numerous excuses to come to town. Sometimes he claimed he needed supplies from the general store. Other times he said he had business with the bank. But he always ended up at Doc Patterson's office, or at Sophia's cabin, or wherever she happened to be working. They began spending more time together, taking walks along the river that ran through Reno, sharing meals at the Silver Spoon, talking about everything and nothing. Sophia learned that Wade had no family left, that his parents and younger sister had died of fever when he was 17, that he had been wandering ever since, looking for a place to belong. She learned that he loved horses more than just about anything, that he had a gift for gentling even the most difficult animals, that he dreamed of someday having his own small ranch. Wade learned that Sophia could be fierce when defending her patients, that she had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard, that she was lonely in a way that matched his own loneliness. He learned that she was stronger than she looked, that she could set a bone or stitch a wound without flinching, that she had seen more death and suffering than most people twice her age. The town began to notice their growing attachment, and as Sophia had expected, there was gossip. Some of it was harmless speculation about when they might marry. Some of it was more pointed, suggesting that Sophia was being foolish to waste her time on a common ranch hand when she could probably find a better match. A few people whispered that it was unseemly for a young woman to spend so much time alone with a man who was not her husband. Sophia tried to ignore the gossip, but it stung nonetheless. One afternoon, when she was at the general store buying bandages, she overheard two women talking. "I am just saying, it is not proper," one of them said, not bothering to lower her voice. "That Sinclair girl, carrying on with that cowboy like she has no sense of decency." "Well, what do you expect?" the other woman replied. "She spends all her time around men, tending to their injuries. It is bound to give her ideas above her station." Sophia felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her head high as she paid for her supplies and left the store. She told herself their opinions did not matter, that she was doing nothing wrong. But the words echoed in her head nonetheless. That evening, when Wade came by her cabin, she was quieter than usual. He noticed immediately, his expression turning concerned. "What is wrong?" he asked. Sophia considered lying, but she had never been good at hiding her feelings. "People are talking about us," she said finally, "saying that it is not proper for us to spend so much time together." Wade's jaw tightened. "I do not care what people say." "Well, I have to care," Sophia said, frustrated. "I live in this town, I work here. If people decide I am not respectable, they will not come to me for help. And then what will I do?" "Then marry me," Wade said suddenly. The words hung in the air between them, shocking them both. Wade looked as surprised as Sophia felt, as if he had not quite meant to say it out loud. "What?" Sophia whispered. "Marry me," Wade repeated, his voice steadier now. "I know we have not been courting for very long, but I care about you, Sophia. More than I have ever cared about anyone. I want to build a life with you. If people are going to talk anyway, let us give them something real to talk about." Sophia's heart was pounding so hard she could barely think. "Wade, that is crazy. You cannot just propose marriage because of some gossip." "I am not," he insisted, stepping closer to her. "I am proposing because every day I am not with you feels like a waste, because when I think about my future, you are in it. Because you are the bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I would be honored if you would be my wife." Tears stung Sophia's eyes. She wanted to say yes, wanted it so badly it frightened her. But there were practical considerations, realities they could not ignore. "I cannot give up my work," she said. "Even if we marry, I need to continue helping Doc Patterson. It is who I am." "I know that," Wade said gently, "and I would never ask you to give it up. I fell in love with you exactly as you are. I do not want you to change. You love me." Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Wade said simply. "I love you." "I love you too," Sophia admitted, the words spilling out before she could stop them, and as she said them, she realized they were true. Somewhere over the past weeks, she had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with this man. "But Wade, you work at the Double R. I live in town. How would we make it work?" "I have been saving my wages," Wade said. "I have enough to buy a piece of land, just a small parcel, but enough to build a house and start a modest ranch. We could live between town and the ranch. You could still work with Doc Patterson and I could raise horses. It would not be easy, but we could make it work. If you want to." Sophia looked at him, at the hope and love shining in his blue eyes, and she knew her answer. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Wade let out a breath he seemed to have been holding and pulled her into his arms. He kissed her then, a kiss that was gentle and passionate and full of promise. Sophia melted into him, feeling something inside her that had been locked away for so long finally break free. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling like fools. "We should probably tell Doc Patterson," Sophia said, suddenly practical. "And I suppose we need to figure out when and how to have a wedding." "We could do it this weekend," Wade suggested. No reason to wait, is there? This weekend, Sophia laughed. That is only 5 days away. Exactly, Wade said. 5 days too long, in my opinion. They decided on the following Saturday, giving them a week to make arrangements. It would be a simple ceremony, just a few friends and the justice of the peace, but that was all they needed. Doc Patterson was delighted when they told him, immediately offering to give Sophia away since her father was not there to do it. I knew that boy would be back, the old doctor said with satisfaction. Saw it in his eyes the first night of the storm. The week passed in a blur of preparations. Sophia bought fabric and sewed herself a new dress, simple but beautiful in cream-colored cotton. Wade used some of his savings to buy a plain gold ring from the jeweler in town. They arranged to rent a small house on the edge of Reno temporarily, with plans to start building on their land as soon as possible. On the morning of the wedding, Sophia woke with a mixture of excitement and nervousness fluttering in her stomach. She dressed carefully, pinning her hair up with shaking fingers. Doc Patterson arrived to escort her to the justice of the peace's office, where Wade was waiting with a few of the men from the Double R Ranch who had become his friends. Wade looked almost unbearably handsome in a new suit, his dark hair combed back, his blue eyes bright with emotion when he saw her. The ceremony itself was brief and simple, just the exchange of vows and rings, but when the justice pronounced them husband and wife and Wade kissed her, Sophia felt as if her whole life had been leading to this moment. They had a small celebration afterward at the Silver Spoon, with food and music and toasts to their future. But as the evening wore on, Sophia found herself eager to leave, to be alone with her new husband. They slipped away from the party and walked to their rented house, hand in hand under the stars. Inside, Wade lit a lamp and turned to face her, suddenly looking uncertain. "I have never done this before," he admitted. "Been married, I mean. I am not sure I will be very good at it." "Neither have I," Sophia said, stepping closer to him. "I suppose we will figure it out together." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "I promise I will do everything I can to make you happy." "You already do," Sophia whispered. And then she kissed him, and there was no more need for words. Their wedding night was tender and uncertain and wonderful, a discovery of each other that left them both breathless and amazed. Sophia had tended to enough patience over the years to have a clinical understanding of what happened between a man and a woman. But the reality of it with Wade was nothing like the detached medical knowledge. It was intimate and vulnerable and beautiful, and when she fell asleep in his arms, she felt more content than she had ever felt in her life. The next morning, they woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of church bells ringing in the distance. Wade propped himself up on one elbow and looked down at her with an expression of wonder. "Good morning, Mrs. Nichols," he said softly. "Good morning, Mr. Nichols," Sophia replied, loving the sound of her new name. They spent a lazy Sunday together, the only day Wade had off from ranch work. They talked about their plans for the future, about the house they would build and the life they would create together. Wade showed her the piece of land he had purchased, a pretty stretch of valley about 3 miles from town with a creek running through it and good grass for grazing horses. "It is perfect," Sophia said, standing beside him and looking out over what would be their home. "We could build the house right there on that rise. It would have a view of the mountains. And I could put up a barn and some corrals over there," Wade added, pointing. "Start with just a few horses and build from there." They spent the afternoon walking the property, planning and dreaming. By the time they headed back to town, they were both tired but happy, full of excitement for what lay ahead. The next week fell into a new rhythm. Wade continued working at the Double R during the day while Sophia kept helping Doc Patterson. In the evenings, they would have dinner together and work on plans for their ranch. On weekends, Wade began the work of building their house, with help from some of the men at the Double R who thought it was right romantic that he was building a home for his new bride. Sophia spent her free time gathering furnishings and supplies, sewing curtains and quilts, preparing to make their house a home. She also continued her work at Doc Patterson's office, tending to the various injuries and illnesses that were common in a rough mining town. About a month after their wedding, a man came into the office with what he claimed was a snakebite on his hand. Sophia examined it carefully and determined it was actually just a bad scratch, though the man insisted he had been bitten. "I am telling you it was a rattler," the man said, his face pale with fear. "I need something for the venom." "There is no venom," Sophia assured him. "Look, there are no fang marks, just scratches. You probably caught your hand on some brush or rocks. I will clean it and bandage it, and you will be fine." The man left grudgingly, muttering about how women did not know anything about medicine. Doc Patterson, who had been in the back room, came out shaking his head. "Some people will never trust a woman's judgment, no matter how skilled she is," he said. "I know," Sophia replied with a sigh, "but as long as you trust me, that is what matters." "I more than trust you," the old doctor said seriously. "You are the finest assistant I have ever had. Better than most doctors I have worked with, if I am being honest. You have a gift, Sophia." The praise warmed her, but it also made her think about the future. Doc Patterson was getting older, his hands shakier, his energy flagging. What would happen to the people of Reno when he could no longer practice? The nearest other doctor was nearly 50 miles away. Someone would need to fill that role, and Sophia knew she had the skills to do it. But would people accept a woman doctor? It seemed unlikely in 1883, even in a progressive place like Nevada. She pushed the worry aside for now, focusing on the present. There would be time enough to worry about the future. As summer turned to fall, the house on their land began to take shape. It was a simple structure, just 4 rooms and a front porch, but it was sturdy and well built. Wade worked on it every spare moment, and Sophia often joined him, helping where she could. There was something deeply satisfying about building something with their own hands, about creating a home together. One evening in October, as they were hammering shingles onto the roof, Wade suddenly stopped and looked at her. "What?" Sophia asked, noticing his stare. "I was just thinking how lucky I am," he said. "That storm that came through town, it brought me to you. If I had not gotten thrown from my horse, I might never have worked up the courage to talk to you." Sophia laughed. "You would have found a way. You are remarkably persistent when you want something." "True," Wade admitted with a grin. "But I am still grateful for that storm. Best thing that ever happened to me, even if my arm did hurt like hell." "Did it really hurt?" Sophia asked curiously. "Or were you exaggerating?" Wade had the grace to look sheepish. "Well, it hurt at first, but by the time I came back for that checkup, it was mostly fine. I just wanted an excuse to see you again." "I knew it," Sophia said triumphantly. "You are a fraud, Wade Nichols." "A fraud who loves you," he countered, pulling her close for a kiss. By November, the house was finished enough that they could move in. It still needed some interior work, but the walls were up, the roof was solid, and there was a working fireplace to keep them warm through the winter. They spent their first night in their new home curled up together in front of the fire, wrapped in quilts and talking about all the years ahead of them. "I want to fill this house with children," Wade said softly. "Lots of them, running around and causing trouble. Lots." Sophia repeated with mock alarm. "How many is lots?" "I do not know, 4 or 5 maybe," Wade said hopefully. Sophia laughed. "We will see. Let us start with 1 and go from there." "Deal," Wade agreed, kissing the top of her head, As winter set in, life settled into a comfortable pattern. Wade had left his job at the Double R and was now working full-time on their ranch, building corrals and purchasing their first horses. Sophia continued her work with Doc Patterson, riding into town 3 or 4 days a week to help with patients. The rest of the time, she worked on their homestead, tending a small garden, sewing and cooking, making their house into a home. She also discovered, to her surprise and delight, that she was pregnant. She told Wade on a snowy December evening, and the joy on his face was something she knew she would remember forever. "We are going to have a baby?" he asked, as if he could not quite believe it. "Yes," Sophia confirmed, laughing at his expression. "Probably sometime in June or July, if my calculations are correct." Wade swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her protests that he should be careful. "I am going to be a father," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be a family." That winter was cold and difficult, with heavy snows that sometimes kept Sophia trapped at the ranch for days at a time. But she did not mind. She loved being in their small house with Wade, loved watching him care for the horses, loved planning for the baby that would arrive with the summer. Doc Patterson was pleased about the pregnancy but concerned about Sophia continuing to work as it progressed. "You need to take care of yourself," he insisted. "No lifting heavy patients, no long hours on your feet." "I will be careful," Sophia promised, "but I am not made of glass." Women have been having babies and continuing their work for thousands of years. Still, as her belly grew and the baby became more real, Sophia found herself scaling back her hours at the doctor's office. It was partly because the work was becoming more physically difficult, but also because she wanted to spend more time preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and setting up a cradle that Wade had built with his own hands. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought an explosion of wildflowers across the valley. Sophia spent long afternoons sitting on the porch, her hand on her swelling belly, watching Wade work with the horses in the corral. They had 6 horses now, and Wade was breaking them to sell. He was good at it, patient and gentle, and word was starting to spread about the quality of his work. In May, a wealthy rancher from California came to look at Wade's horses and ended up buying 3 of them for a substantial sum. The money would be enough to buy more breeding stock and expand their operation significantly. "We are going to make it," Wade said that night, holding Sophia close. "This is really going to work." "I never doubted it," Sophia replied, though truthfully there had been moments when she had worried. But Wade's hard work was paying off and their future looked brighter than ever. As June approached, Sophia grew increasingly uncomfortable. The baby seemed to press on every organ in her body, making it hard to sleep, hard to breathe, hard to find a comfortable position. But she also felt a growing excitement, an eagerness to finally meet the child she had been carrying all these months. Doc Patterson came out to the ranch to check on her regularly, and he assured her that everything looked normal. "You are healthy and strong," he said. "You should have no trouble with the delivery, but I will plan to be here when your time comes, just in case." Wade was simultaneously excited and terrified about the impending birth. "What if something goes wrong?" he asked Sophia one night. "What if I lose you?" "You will not lose me," Sophia said firmly, taking his hand and placing it on her belly where the baby was kicking. "I am too stubborn to die in childbirth, and besides, I know more about delivering babies than most doctors. I will be fine." But as confident as she sounded, Sophia knew that childbirth was dangerous, that even healthy women sometimes died bringing life into the world. She had seen it happen, had held the hands of women who slipped away despite all efforts to save them. The thought that it could happen to her was terrifying. Still, she tried not to dwell on the fear. She focused instead on the joy of feeling the baby move, on the excitement of knowing that soon she would hold her child in her arms. The baby came on a hot July afternoon, 2 weeks later than Sophia had calculated. She was hanging laundry when the first pain hit, a tightening across her belly that took her breath away. She knew immediately what it meant. "Wade," she called, and he came running from the barn, taking one look at her face and understanding. "I will get Doc Patterson," he said, already moving toward the horse. "There is no time," Sophia said, another contraction gripping her. "The baby is coming now. You are going to have to help me." Wade went pale, but he helped her into the house and onto the bed they had prepared for this moment. Sophia talked him through what needed to be done, staying as calm as she could between contractions. The pain was intense, worse than anything she had experienced, but she focused on her breathing, on staying present and aware. It was over faster than she had expected. One moment she was gripping Wade's hand and pushing with all her strength, and the next, there was a thin wail and Wade was holding a tiny, squirming infant. "It is a boy," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Sophia, we have a son." He placed the baby on Sophia's chest, and she looked down at the tiny face, at the perfect fingers and toes, and felt a rush of love so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Doc Patterson arrived an hour later, having been fetched by Wade as soon as the baby was safely delivered. He examined both Sophia and the infant and pronounced them healthy. "You did well," he told Wade with a grin. "For someone who had never delivered a baby before, you kept your head admirably." "I had a good teacher," Wade said, looking at Sophia with such love in his eyes that it made her heart ache. They named the baby William, after Wade's father. He was a healthy, hungry infant who seemed determined to make his presence known at all hours of the day and night. Sophia was exhausted from the sleepless nights and constant demands of caring for a newborn, but she had never been happier. Wade was a devoted father, taking over the nighttime feedings whenever he could so Sophia could rest. He would walk the floor with William for hours, singing off key lullabies and talking to the baby about horses and ranching, and all the things they would do together when William was older. As summer faded into fall, Sophia slowly returned to her work with Doc Patterson, bringing William with her when she could and leaving him with Wade when she could not. It was a delicate balance, managing motherhood and her medical work, but she was determined to maintain both. Doc Patterson's health had been declining, and by the time William was 6 months old, it was clear that the old doctor would not be able to continue much longer. His hands shook too badly to perform surgery, and he tired easily. He began talking about retiring, about closing his practice and moving back east to live with his sister. "But what will the town do without a doctor?" Sophia asked, concerned. "They will have you," Doc Patterson said simply. "You are more than capable of taking over my practice, Sophia. You know as much as any trained physician, maybe more in some areas." "But I am not a real doctor," Sophia protested. "I have no degree, no formal training." "You have something better," the old doctor insisted. "You have skill and experience and the trust of the people you have helped. That matters more than any piece of paper." The idea both thrilled and terrified Sophia. She had always thought of herself as Doc Patterson's assistant, never as a doctor in her own right. But the people of Reno needed medical care, and she was the most qualified person to provide it. She talked it over with Wade that evening, expressing her doubts and fears. "You should do it," Wade said without hesitation. "You are brilliant at what you do and people respect you." "Yes, some folks will grumble about having a woman doctor, but they will get over it when they need help and you are the only one who can provide it." "You really think I can do this?" Sophia asked. "I know you can," Wade replied. You are the strongest, most capable person I know. If anyone can do this, it is you." So when Doc Patterson officially retired in the spring of 1885, Sophia took over his practice. She kept the same office in town, hung out a simple sign that read S. Nichols, Medical Services, and waited to see what would happen. At first, business was slow. Some people were reluctant to seek treatment from a woman, preferring to wait for a male doctor to make the long trip from Virginia City. But gradually, as people remembered Sophia's skill and compassion, as they saw that she was just as capable as Doc Patterson had been, the patients came back. There were challenges, of course. Some men refused to be treated by her, insisting on traveling to see another doctor even for minor ailments. Some people paid her less than they would have paid a male physician, assuming her services were worth less. And there was always gossip, always someone suggesting that it was not proper for a woman to be doing such work. But Sophia persevered. She treated injuries and illnesses with the same skill and care she always had. She delivered babies and set bones and stitched wounds. She gained a reputation for being particularly good with children, who were less afraid of her gentle manner than they were of the gruff male doctors in other towns. By the time William was 2 years old, Sophia's practice was thriving. She had earned the respect of most of the community, and even some of her harshest critics had to admit that she knew what she was doing. Wade's horse ranch was also doing well, and they had expanded to include cattle as well. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and they were happy. In the fall of 1886, Sophia discovered she was pregnant again. William was excited about the idea of a baby brother or sister, though at 3 years old, he did not fully understand what it meant. Wade was just as excited as he had been the first time, perhaps even more so now that he knew what to expect. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Sophia knew what to anticipate. She continued working almost until the day the baby came, much to Wade's consternation. "You are going to work yourself into exhaustion," he complained when she returned from town one evening, 8 months pregnant and looking tired. "I am fine," Sophia insisted. "Women have been working while pregnant since the beginning of time. I am not going to sit around doing nothing just because I am expecting." Their daughter arrived on a mild March evening in 1887, a tiny, fierce little thing with dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. They named her Sarah, after Wade's mother, and William was immediately smitten with his baby sister. "She is so small," he whispered, touching her tiny hand with one finger. "Can I help take care of her?" "Of course you can," Sophia said, showing him how to gently rock the cradle and how to hold a bottle for Sarah to eat. Life with 2 children was chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Sophia cut back her hours at the office, focusing on urgent cases and making house calls when necessary. Wade hired a young ranch hand to help with the work so he could spend more time with the family. They built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. As the years passed, their family grew. In 1889, they had another son whom they named Thomas. In 1891, a second daughter arrived whom they called Elizabeth. 4 children kept them busy from dawn until well past dark, but Sophia would not have changed a thing. She continued her medical practice, though at a reduced capacity. She no longer kept regular office hours, instead working from home and traveling to patients as needed. She gained a reputation as the best doctor in the region, and people came from miles away to seek her help, especially for difficult births and injuries that other doctors had given up on. Wade's ranch became one of the most successful in the area. His horses were known for their quality, and he had established breeding lines that were sought after by ranchers and cavalry officers alike. He also took the time to teach his children about ranching, about caring for animals and working the land. William, in particular, showed a natural talent for working with horses. One evening in 1893, when Sophia was 40 years old and William was nearly 10, the family was sitting on the porch watching the sunset. Sarah was playing with a kitten Wade had brought home from town, while Thomas and Elizabeth chased fireflies in the yard. "We have built a good life," Wade said quietly, taking Sophia's hand. "We have," she agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Sometimes I think about that storm, about the night you showed up pretending your arm hurt just so you could see me." Wade laughed. "My arm did hurt. At first anyway." "You are still a terrible liar," Sophia teased. "Maybe so," Wade said. "But I am an honest husband, and I love you more now than I did the day we married." "I love you too," Sophia said softly. "Thank you for building this life with me, for supporting my work, for being a partner in every sense of the word. Thank you for taking a chance on a wandering cowboy who did not have much to offer except hard work and devotion," Wade replied. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play, listening to the sound of horses nickering in the corral and the soft rush of wind through the grass. It had not always been easy, this life they had built. There had been hard times, lean years, losses and disappointments. But through it all, they had each other, and that had been enough. As the years continued to pass, Sophia and Wade watched their children grow into capable adults. William took over more of the ranch work, showing the same gift his father had for training horses. Sarah proved to have a keen mind and a compassionate nature, and when she turned 16, she began helping Sophia with her medical work. "I want to be a doctor like you," Sarah announced one day. "I want to help people." Sophia felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. The world was changing, slowly but surely, and there were now a few women's medical colleges in the East. But it would still be a difficult path, filled with prejudice and obstacles. "It will not be easy," Sophia warned her daughter. "You will face resistance and discrimination just because you are a woman." "I know," Sarah said firmly, "but you did it. Even without formal training, I can do it too." And she did. In 1895, at the age of 18, Sarah traveled to San Francisco to attend the Women's Medical College there. It was hard for Sophia to let her daughter go, but she knew it was the right thing. Sarah wrote letters home describing her studies, her excitement about learning all the things Sophia had taught herself through experience and observation. Meanwhile, Thomas showed an interest in the law, while Elizabeth loved teaching and began working at the small school in Reno. William married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, and soon Sophia and Wade were grandparents to a beautiful baby girl. As Sophia entered her 50s, she began to slow down. The long hours and physical demands of medical practice were harder on her aging body, but she continued to work, unable to fully give up the calling that had defined so much of her life. She knew that when Sarah graduated and came home, she would have a worthy successor. In 1899, Sarah returned to Reno with her medical degree, the first formally trained female doctor in the region. She joined her mother's practice, and together they treated patients, with Sarah handling the more physically demanding cases while Sophia focused on consultation and teaching. "You must be proud," Wade said one evening, watching Sophia and Sarah work together on a difficult surgery. "I am," Sophia admitted. "I never imagined when I was her age that I would have a daughter who would become a real doctor. The world is changing, Wade. Slowly, but it is changing." "Thanks in part to you," Wade pointed out. "You showed people that a woman could do this work. You paved the way for Sarah and for other women who will come after." Sophia had never thought of herself as a pioneer, but she supposed Wade was right. By refusing to give up her calling, by persisting in the face of prejudice and doubt, she had helped change attitudes in her community. As the new century dawned, Sophia and Wade entered their 60s together. They were grandparents several times over now, with William and his wife having 4 children, and Sarah having married a young doctor and started her own family. Thomas had become a lawyer in Carson City, and Elizabeth was married to a teacher and had 2 children. Wade's hair was completely gray now, and his back ached on cold mornings, but he still worked with the horses every day. Sophia's hands were marked with age spots and old scars from years of medical work, but they were still steady when she needed them to be. One spring afternoon in 1902, they were sitting on their porch, much as they had 20 years earlier, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. "Do you ever regret it?" Wade asked suddenly. "Giving up a more conventional life to be with me and to keep practicing medicine?" Sophia looked at him in surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. Why would you ask that?" "I just want to make sure you are happy," Wade said. "That I gave you the life you deserved." "You gave me everything I ever wanted," Sophia said, taking his weathered hand in hers. "A partner who respected my work, a family that fills my heart, a life of purpose and meaning. How could I want anything more?" Wade smiled, the same smile that had captured her heart all those years ago. "I am glad, because you gave me everything too. A home, a family, a reason to stay in one place and build something that lasts." They sat together as the sun set over the mountains, their hands clasped, their hearts full. In the distance, they could hear Sarah calling her children in for supper, could see William working with a young horse in the corral, teaching his oldest son the same lessons Wade had taught him. It was a good life, Sophia thought, a life built on love and hard work and determination. It had started with a storm and a lie, with a cowboy pretending his arm hurt just to have an excuse to see her. But it had grown into something beautiful and lasting, a legacy that would continue through their children and grandchildren. As night fell and the stars came out, Wade helped Sophia up from her chair, and they walked inside together, into the house they had built with their own hands, into the life they had created together. And Sophia knew that no matter what happened, no matter how many years they had left, she would never regret the choice she had made that day in the Silver Spoon restaurant, when she had said yes to a cowboy with honest eyes and a dream of building something lasting. Years later, when Sophia was in her 70s and Wade was struggling with a weak heart, they would sit together in the evenings and reminisce about their life. They would talk about that first storm, about the patients she had tended, and the way Wade had kept coming back with invented ailments. "I knew from the first moment I saw you that you were special," Wade told her one evening. "The way you moved through that room full of injured men, so calm and capable, I fell in love with you before I even knew your name." "And I fell in love with you the moment I realized you were lying about your arm," Sophia replied with a smile. "Because I knew then that you were willing to make a fool of yourself just to spend time with me. That is when I knew you were worth keeping." Wade passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1909, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, with Sophia holding his hand. She felt as if part of her had died with him, but she also felt grateful for the 50 years they had shared, for the life they had built together. Sophia lived another 6 years, continuing to consult on difficult medical cases and spending time with her ever-growing family. She taught her grandchildren and great-grandchildren about medicine and compassion, about the importance of following your calling even when the world tells you that you cannot. When she died in 1915 at the age of 72, the town of Reno mourned her passing. She had delivered most of the people in town under the age of 40, had treated countless injuries and illnesses, had saved lives that would have been lost without her skill and dedication. At her funeral, Sarah stood up to speak about her mother. "She was a pioneer," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not because she sought recognition or fame, but because she refused to let anything stop her from doing what she believed was right. She showed me and countless other women that we could be more than what society expected. She saved lives, raised a family, and changed the world in her own quiet way. And she did it all while loving one man with her whole heart, a cowboy who pretended his arm hurt just to get her attention." The congregation laughed through their tears at that, and Sarah smiled. "They built something beautiful together, my parents. A life based on love and respect and partnership. That is the legacy they leave behind, and it is one worth celebrating." Sophia was buried next to Wade on a hillside overlooking their ranch, with a simple headstone that read, "Sophia Nichols, healer and beloved wife, mother, and grandmother." But her real legacy was not in stone. It was in the medical practice, Sarah continued. In the ranch, William still ran. In the lives of the dozens of people she had saved over her long career. It was in the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried her genes and her values forward into the future. And it was in the story that was told and retold in Reno for generations after, about the nurse who tended wounded men after a storm, and the cowboy who pretended his arm hurt just to see her, and the beautiful, lasting love that grew from that first dishonest moment into something true and enduring.